Hey guys, welcome to the Tetra Health and Performance Podcast. Today we're talking all things putting muscle on, hypertrophy, getting jacked, getting yoked. But hey, ladies, before you click off, listen, stay with me. This is still relevant to if you're saying the word tone or body composition, dropping body fat, this is still for you. So stay tuned with us and let's explore all things putting on muscle and see how that's going to affect all your goals and your targets, because it will.
Yeah, muscle is super important just for health goals. Building more muscle means building more energy in the body, as well as any body composition goal is going to normally require increasing some muscle mass or muscle density and dropping some body fat. So to start off today, we're gonna discuss number one priority, most important thing about creating muscle mass is adherence, getting in,
Do the bloody thing. So it won't work if you don't.
just doing the work, making sure you come in, you get the session done. And at the end of the day, a program followed, however bad a program is better than following no program at all.
100%. And that's not being burst. This is like you thinking that big lens thing. This is being consistent through like a week, through a month lens, through a quarter lens, through a year lens. And consistency and adherence by a long period of time is, God, it's a lot of beautiful things that we can do to the body and a lot of effect and change that we can make. So having a short-term lens, but also having a large-term lens of what your goals and targets are and how you want to affect your muscle and your results is definitely something to keep in the back of your mind.
And normally, when you see someone whose physique you admire, they wouldn't have done that overnight. They would have done that over years and years and years of hard work. So quite often we have this unrealistic expectation where we think that we can get these gains in just a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, when really it's a longer journey than that. And maintaining the journey, really, you find that you just got to keep pushing, work through years and years and years of training, and you will get results in 3 months, but you'll get better results in 6, and so on all the way. Hopefully, it's a thing for life, as we mentioned that it makes such a big difference in your health as well.
There's multiple factors that go into muscle, building muscle, and that's what we're about to talk into. So adherence, number one, like if you do that, that's a lot of the battle done. If you make some other mistakes down the road, but just being consistent, you're still going to drive some positive effects, or at least some effects to your physiology. Um, we'll go dive into progressive overload and those good points.
Yep. First,
Let's do it.
we're going to talk today through a proper hypertrophy lens, so a muscle building lens. So these things won't always work towards strength goals or towards other types of goals. Today, we're going to solely talk through how to build muscle. So first off, the 3 mechanisms of building muscle, and some of these are still kind of changed here and there. There's lots of evidence to prove that you need these 3 things, or you want these 3 things, but you can't have 2 without the other. And so we go through mechanical tension. So enough tension needs to be on the muscle for it to grow. Muscular damage. So you actually have to have done enough volume with that tension to actually create some damage. And that's also the one that's kind of a little bit wishy-washy as well. You don't need as much damage as most people think, so you don't have to be sore from every session. And I like to say that if you're never sore from training, you're probably not training hard enough. But if you're always sore, you're probably training too hard.
100%.
And the last one, metabolic stress. So this is the buildup of metabolites in the muscle, in the cells that cause a stress in the body to the muscle to adapt.
Beautiful. It said mechanical load too. That's obviously picking something up heavy and challenging that system. And one of the cool things that helps out with that first topic is the ability to track and know what you're doing with your weight and making sure that we're getting slight improvements on it. So we call this progressive overload. So if you have a system or a program that you are following, excellent. And you should have like a main movement or movements that are your foundational movements that you're going to keep progressing and keep tracking. So writing down or knowing what the sets and the reps are and the load that you're moving for how many times you're moving it or the tempo and all that sort of stuff, and making sure that we can slightly beat it. And like marginally, it can be by 1 or 2 reps or by a very slight weight increase. That's going to put a challenge in your system. And that's going to be one of the biggest drivers, that progressive overload, one of the biggest drivers to changing your system and putting on some damn muscle.
So the cool thing about progressive overload is it's defined as in order to produce improvements in performance, training must be challenging enough to be to the targeted systems, which could be like I'm training cardio, so it works for everything that we train, and also to the tissues that we want to stimulate. And when we look at progressive overload, like Mitch just said, we want to slowly improve the load, but we're going to look at that as everyone is very different. So we have a two things. We have this kind of bracket that we want to work in between. We have everyone's minimum effective volume. So that's the least amount of work you can do to get some sort of result. And then on the top end, you have your maximal recoverable volume. Well, that's if I go any higher than that, then what actually happens is I can't recover to train again, and I cause so much damage that I actually don't recover positively. In between that is the sweet spot. So actually, minimum effective volume is actually normally too low, or it will result in too little gains. We have something called a maximal adaptive volume that sits in between MAV and MRV. And really, when you train, you want to find that for yourself, and you want to find that maximal adaptive volume, and you want to work your way up to maximal recoverable volume, then deload to some level or resensitize, and then when you resensitize, you're now that volume will decrease that you need to get stimulus, and you go back up, and then
Oh,
we
yeah.
just go back down and up, down and up, down and up, over and over again.
And this will be a little bit different depending on where you're at with your training journey. So someone that's very new, probably maybe never been in a gym environment, never done these type of movements or done this type of resistance training, your minimal volume is going to be pretty low. It's not going to take much to affect you and challenge your system. And you're going to need good recovery strategies to adapt and come back and hit it. So that might be someone, this is just random numbers, so you might only need 2 or 3 sessions to drive some hypertrophy changes. But someone that's been doing it for quite a few years and might be deemed as a more of an intermediate to an advanced lifter, you're going to need a little bit more acute volume and stress and challenging that system a little bit more. So you're going to have a little bit of a different minimal volume, and you're going to have a different recoverable volume as well. So these things aren't just set in stone. They change and adapt depending on your experiences and what training you have done in the past or what you're currently doing and so forth.
And while picking up a heavier weight can be super challenging, doing an extra few reps in a set can also be very challenging. We actually find the easiest way to provide this stimulus to most people is to add a set on the back end. Like Mitch just said, you might just start at 2, 3 sessions. Well, starting at 2, 3 sessions might fit you in that maximal adaptive volume where you're getting some really good gains. Well, the easiest thing could actually be, rather than make them sessions more intense, it could be now add another session in.
Mm.
So it could be that you add sets inside the session, which is the easiest way to accrue volume with less intensity, or you can add an extra session in the week. So sometimes starting with just 2, 3 sessions fits you in the right space, that when you add an extra session in, you're perfectly like still getting the adaptation without actually having to work too hard.
Awesome, awesome. That is fantastic. So it takes a bit of time to understand this and know this, but you kind of figure it out pretty quick. So if you're hobbling, you can't get off that chair, and you got so many DOMs and you're so sore, you might pull back the intensity a little bit and upregulate the recovery strategies and kind of find that sweet spot.
And like you said, Mitch, tracking. Like when
Mm,
you are tracking, you're really going to be paying attention to that. I like little notes on the bottom of my bottom of the set going really, really hard. Or like you can even go back the next day and note that I was very sore from that session.
yep.
That pretty means that you can apply that same stimulus again, yep, and get results from it rather than having to jump ahead. So say for example, I do 3 sets on my bench press of 12 reps, just arbitrary numbers, and I get ridiculously sore in my chest for the next day. Well, I pretty know that next week I can just do the same volume and I'm still going to get something out of it. Then the week after, I may want to slightly increase that. I think when we're talking about this, the other thing to pay attention to is, like I just said, is recovery and the frequency. So for us to play around with progressive overload, and as I said, that maximal recoverable volume, well, the big word there is recoverable. The frequency is and recovery are identical already in terms. If I apply a higher frequency, then I'm going to need to recover better. Yeah. If I need to recover better, I can apply a lower frequency.
100%. And the other one in there is intensity. If I've got high frequency with high intensity, guess what? That recovery better be on point. So there's going to be multiple things kind of in play. If intensity is kind of high with your sessions, that recovery strategy is going to be needs to be pretty on point. If I've got high intensity and high volume, high frequency, oh mate, that's a harder environment to get recovery from and adaptation and to be back in again for another session. So you've got to kind of manage that program that you're on and kind of have your right peaks and troughs with volume and intensity.
And when we talk hypertrophy as well, there is a quite sweet spot of volume and intensity. For example, we don't want too high a volume with too low in intensity, and we don't want too high in intensity with too low a volume. So normally we find that we call it reps in reserve, well, reps in reserve or reps to failure. So I could say that I'm 2 reps from failure, or I have 2 reps in reserve after a set. Well, actually, that's probably the best place for growth, which we might be at like these kind of 80 to 85% of your max weight. And the idea is that quite often we find people who actually train too intensely to get their goal of hypertrophy, or they don't train intensely enough to fit in between that MAV and MRV to get the response.
And then we use that sweet spot with the rep range, generally about 8 to 12 ish, sometimes a little bit more to try and drive that hypertrophy. I'll put a question like, what do you reckon, James, is the right type of frequency for a muscle group, like on general, to kind of get a bit of stimulus? That muscle group to be hit twice, 3 times a week?
Well, it's dependent to the individual and the way they program. Well, a certain muscle tissue. So we're talking about that kind of that maximal recoverable volume. Well, what actually happens is certain. It's not That's not your whole body. It's a systemic thing. So your whole body will feel a certain amount of fatigue, but individual muscles want to be worked to a certain volume. And ideally, most things again, you've got to find that maximal adaptable volume. But you'll find that most muscles actually don't need to be trained that much. And like you said, Mitch, they're normally hypertrophy rep ranges are somewhere between 8 to 12. And I'm going to say you probably want about 2-3 sets a week to start with. Yeah, of a sorry, more like 5 to 10 sets a week per muscle group.
That's awesome. So if you're looking for those juicy bicep gains or those booty gains, there you go. There's a template for you. Start using that and see how you go.
This rolls on pretty well to like the next principle, which is specificity.
Mhm.
And like I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to talk solely about hypertrophy. So when it comes to specificity, the principle of specificity, God, it's a hard one to say, states that all training should directly or indirectly support the desired end result. So we have phases of training that are very, very direct to hypertrophy, and we call them, believe it or not, hypertrophy training. So that's where we're going to hit them rep ranges and sets. But then we also have potentiation phases. So we have a phase that sets you up ready to do better in your hypertrophy phase, and that can be strength phases, that can be power phases. They work pretty well as potentiation phases. Also have interference, like so. If I have a potentiation and I want to train things towards a specific goal, then what we want to do is we want to reduce, and we've discussed this a few times. We want to reduce interference. So interference being things that actually don't help me towards my goal and take up energy or are very contradictory to my goal. Where if I'm training them, I'm going to burn energy, I'm going to get tired, and it's actually going to stop me being able to perform with my specific hypertrophy training.
An example of this is doing like a pre-fatigue set prior a big compound movement. So a driver to one of your main lifts, let's say like you're working on some lower body, you're working on some good old deadlifts, doing a bunch of hamstring or glute isolated drills prior, probably not the best if you're seeking hypertrophy out of your deadlift. So you want to be pretty fresh as the daisy, so you can get the best adaptation you can out of your sets and reps. So then you can drive that hypertrophy adaptation for yourself. So always, that's kind of that hierarchy of movements too, right? Those movements that are going to drive that hypertrophy and build that muscle for you, they're going to be at that top while you're fresh, and kind of we'll drop hierarchy as we go down. So our first couple of big drivers of hypertrophy, and then we'll drop down the order of importance after that.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of priority in session because we know that we adapt mostly to the thing we do first because that's where we have the most energy to perform. And then we can look at it through like a typical principle with most people's training is to put that kind of the compound exercise first. Well, fantastic, because if I'm doing a squat, I'm working my quads, I'm working my butt, I'm working my back extenders. So then for me to then go on after that, it wouldn't make too much sense for me to do something that fatigues the ability for me to train all three things first. But then I can go and say, okay, well, when I did my squats, I burnt my quads out so hard, but my back extenders didn't work too hard. So I might do some extra back extension, which that's not normally the case. Normally it's the other way around. It's where people do a ton of squats and it's their back extenders that are fried. Their quads are still quite fried. Well, that's add some accessory exercises that finish off the quads and that's finish off the glutes.
It's just painting more of a picture there. So hopefully you maybe have heard these words before, but if not, we'll give more context. That compound move is where multiple joints will be moving and multiple muscle groups are involved. So that squat that James just painted there, we talked about the butt's working, the quads are working, the back of the legs, the hamstrings are working, calves. So the hip, knee, and ankle are all kind of moving at different ranges. Where like an isolation movement, like a good old bicep curl, just the elbows bending and extending, and the biceps the primary loader there. So there's two different ways to kind of look at muscle groups. And generally when we're trying to drive hypertrophy, those multi-joint movements are going to be probably at the start.
There is obviously there is always another way of looking at things as well. Like you can't talk in absolutes, but that's definitely the way we do look at training mostly here. We want to train the compounds first. But quite often you hear of people having lagging muscle groups. Well, it does make sense to bring a lagging muscle group to the front of the session or to earlier in the session when you're not so fatigued. If I'm always training a certain muscle group at the very end of the training, well, I'm not going to be able to get that much hypertrophy from that muscle because I'm always going to be fatigued when I'm training it. So it can kind of come up in the hierarchy. Okay, well, I want to develop my abs more, so I might put them in the middle. The issue with that is that if I do fatigue my abs, then other exercises will be harder to perform. But it's definitely something to look into for people when they are programming for themselves, that I might actually put something earlier on some days to actually make sure I get more benefit from that.
You see, like a whole training system dedicated to this very topic is good old bodybuilding. They're the best at it. And they'll like dedicate a whole day to it, like an arm day, a chest day, a back day, a leg day. And they'll up all that frequency and volume straight to one muscle group. And sometimes maybe shitting a bit too much at it, but they dedicate and localize to those lagging areas. They dedicate a whole training day towards it. So they are the best in the business for it. That's kind of their hyper specialized sport. But again, that's hypertrophy. It's one element. There's many things that get left out of that. But that is also one lens to kind of look at it to make sure you get in development everywhere. You can kind of break up and look at your week and see where do I want to prioritize putting on some muscle? What areas need a bit of love, and how do I break my week, my month to get that volume and adaptation?
Yeah, exactly. Like Mitch said, like when we're talking about that, we mentioned previously that MAV and that MRV. Well, at first, you might only be able to get that kind of maximal adaptive volume in the middle of that with full body sessions, or you might get enough with full body sessions. But then later on, say for example, I want to grow my chest. Well, your chest might have been stimulated to such high volumes, and you can't just deload anymore to get the resensitization. That you actually have to start going, okay, well, I need full body chest days where I'm going to hit like 10 to 20 sets on just my chest. So things do change, and as you get more advanced, you have to take that into consideration that you have applied so much stimulus and load into your body that it needs more to adapt. Hence that progressive overload principle. It's like, and we talk about training for years. Well, as you start training into them 2, 3, 4, 5 years, well, you're going to need different strategies.
This is a really cool point. So if you're early on in the journey and using hyper specialized methods, so coming in early and then throwing 30, 40 sets on on your chest, where do you go from there? It's a hard thing. So starting off basic and going that minimal volume and then slowly building up, it's key. So if you start using some advanced principles bloody early on, it's hard to build off that. But starting off with basic foundational ways to build some hypertrophy, it gives you so much foundation to build up and then use more complex modalities later on to drive hypertrophy.
Yeah, I think of it as cutting a piece of wood. I often with a piece of wood, if I'm building something, for example, and I cut the piece of wood, and I know I need a certain length, and if I cut it too short, then I'm done. I have to go get another piece of wood and do it again. Well, actually, it's better to undercut the wood over and over again, and then get it to the right size. And then what you'll do is that's a learning progress. That's a learning process. As I learn, I start to understand my body, and you'll see you get results from that little amount of work. So it's actually better to undercut it, do a little bit less, so you can then recover and get more out of it. But like Mitch just said, like if I'm actually going to come in and I'm just going to do these very advanced methods, well, most of these advanced methods are designed to increase intensity and volume. And these are what people who've been normally, you've seen this as a program who someone's been training for a very long time, where if you do this, you cut the wood too short, you can't recover from it. Therefore, you can't get the gains that you want. And what happens is with your maximal recoverable volume, it sneaks up and up and up, and it becomes more unattainable. And as it becomes more unattainable, we have to work harder and harder and harder. So we actually want to undercut the wood first, cut it a little bit again, cut it a little bit again, find that perfect length, and then we want to resensitize, go back down, do the same thing. And that way you can get a lot from doing less. I'm not saying that you don't have to work hard, because it's always going to be hard. It's always going to be hard work. You want to grind when you're in the gym. But it's just not going to be as hard, and you are going to get results from doing less work, which is smart, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of counterintuitive, like to go in and smash it. I need to be able to slay to drive hypertrophy. It's mate, very supportive of the old slow, bit by bit by bit. And we've talked about this once before, but even like steroid programming, where you see like what we talked about just earlier, bodybuilding, it's the best. It's the whole sport is hypertrophy. And seeing these bodybuilding programs, they are normally very juiced up individuals that can adapt and recover like mutants. So they can handle this training volume because they have enhanced recovery. But that for just the everyday person, we're overshooting by a fair margin.
Yeah, and genetically they might be gifted with certain muscle groups, right? And you see that in bodybuilders as well. Like certain bodybuilders are notorious for having certain muscles that just look incredible. Well, that may be to some extent steroids, lots of it's actually that they have a genetic potential to create certain muscles. And I think you'll find this quite often with most people will have, I actually find it very easy to grow this muscle, but I find it very hard to grow this muscle. And I often see this with females who are kind of scared also to to build too much muscle, where they go, oh, when I train my legs, they just grow so fast. Well, number one, they may not be growing as fast as you think. That might be fat deposited in the legs. But also number two, well, don't think that's going to happen on your whole body, because you're probably going to have to work a lot more volume on your shoulders that aren't genetically so gifted to build. You might have to work a lot more on your arms that aren't so genetically gifted, but you might be lucky that you can just do 3-4 sets of legs. And again, this maximal adaptive volume is specific to different muscle groups and the whole body. So you might not need to do so much on your legs, but you might have to do more on your upper body to see growth. And when it does come to building a physique, then you actually have to look at that a little bit and understand your body enough by doing this this kind of process that we've discussed. And then you can be like, okay, actually, when I train my legs, I'm going to go hard, but I only need to do 3 sets. Okay, when I train my upper body, I have to make sure I work because they just don't grow.
Yeah.
We all know this, calves.
Oh god, the old just wear high socks. You never have to. You never need big calves. You just have high socks all the time. Hey, oh god, ladies in muscle building. Like we talked on this lightly, and this is something to embrace. Like putting on muscle is a beautiful thing, but it's a hard thing to do. Like God, we've said this before. I've been training for like 15 years, mate. And it's still a bloody hard thing to kind of get that extra bit of muscle mass on. It takes time, it takes dedication, and it doesn't happen rapidly. And you slowly adapt, and you'll start to put on the muscle. And God forbid that if you start to get a little bit too big, you can always back off the training volume, and you can kind of find that sweet spot for yourself. But it is hard, and it does take time. It does not happen overnight. And just hormonally, you're at a disadvantage
Yeah.
to put muscle mass
Yeah.
on as well.
Good point.
Blokes have so much more testosterone in their system, and we still bloody struggle. Again, person dependent, but it takes a lot of time and effort, and it is a bit of an uphill battle. So there's a lot of considerations, and you need to go pretty goddamn hard to start putting some muscle on.
Also, we can look at kind of cellularly what happens when we grow muscle. Well, the first thing that happens is it's called sarcoplasmic growth, and with sarcoplasmic growth, it's kind of a preparatory phase of hypertrophy. So what the muscle does before it actually lays down new muscle, it has to swell up. So it has to actually take in all this nutrition, ready to then layer the new fibers. And quite often, what you can see that can come with a little bit of a swelling of the muscles, and we see that after training a lot when the muscles are taking in nutrients. Well, sometimes that isn't actually. You can look a little bit bigger after a training session. You can look a little bit swollen because your muscles are holding onto the body, but sometimes that normally does drop off, right? And then we have myofibrilla growth where we actually lay in tissue, and it's really important that we go through the whole phase of that. Well, we do that often here when we do a training a block. Is what we go from one phase where we work these higher rep ranges, like we discussed earlier. These come more like 8 to 15 rep ranges, or 10 to 15 rep ranges, where we're working on sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which is where we're sweating the cells up. And if we get that right, then when we move on, we're going to being able to challenge the more 8 to 10 rep ranges, where we're actually, or 5 to 10 rep ranges, where we're actually building new muscle tissue. And they do have different looks.
Hey, when you were just talking about the pump there, all I can think is Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Can you give an accent? Can you imitate him?
Wait, do you remember his line in the movie?
Oh, of course, yeah. That's what I'm waiting for you to say.
I'm like, should I say it or not? Oh, Arnie does a great effort here. He's like, obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of the best bodybuilders ever in the world. And it's like the pump. It feels so good. It feels like I am coming. So the pump, Arnold Schwarzenegger's words, not mine. Yeah, so the pump is a bloody sensational feeling, and not something to always chase, but it is a bloody good drive that we're getting some nutrients and stimulus to the old muscles that we're targeting.
I understand, and that is the process of damage as well. When we actually get a pump, we create so much internal force in the muscle tissues that we actually create damage, and hence that's why the bodybuilders chase that pump.
Nice.
A good point, I think, is also that when we're looking at specificity, again, I said it, it's tricky. Often people think that a bigger muscle equates to a stronger muscle, and a stronger muscle will be a bigger muscle. So what you often find is that specificity, we find that actually strength training, well, while it can potentiate hypertrophy, hypertrophy training is specifically hypertrophy training. And a bigger muscle has potential to be a stronger muscle, which we love in here. Like actually, let's go for a hypertrophy phase to then get that muscle stronger. But it's not to say that strong muscles have to be big muscles.
There's proof in that. You watch these Olympic lifters, these low weight Olympic lifters doing ridiculous weight at like under 60, under 70 kilo weight classes. It's amazing the amount of force they can produce without being a large built individual.
Yeah, it's incredible. It just doesn't always equal
Mm.
muscle size. Definitely.
You want to, okay, guys, one of the biggest impacts to chucking on some muscle is you've got to be eating some goddamn food. Like this is a massive takeaway here. So if you're someone that's like, I want to put on some muscle, it's one of my big drivers. And okay, just take a step back. When one of the biggest driving factors that we have when we train, it's to look better.
Yep.
And looking better comes from putting muscle mass on. Like it's just hands down. Muscle mass on, dropping a bit of body fat, dropping a bit of fat is a better body fat percentage, and that is aesthetics. That is driving that looking better in the mirror, or looking better naked. So I think this is applicable to like honestly 90% of people's goals. Like a ridiculous amount. Even if you don't think it's putting on muscle, if you want to look better, you want to put on muscle. I guarantee it. And that putting on muscle doesn't happen if we don't have enough fuel to drive the adaptation and to fuel ourselves and help that recovery. So being in a deficit of calories, and we'll dive into this a bit more, it is so much harder to drive muscle mass and get that adaptation.
Yeah, I think the only times you will drive a muscle increase when you are in a calorie deficit is if you're very overweight or if you're very new to training. So once you've had that 3 to 6 months of training volume and intensity, you'll probably find that you can no longer increase muscle mass without a calorie surplus. I really like the saying that nutrition can make a bad program good, but it can also bad nutrition can also make a great program bad. And it's pretty much one of the hardest endeavors as a coach is being like, wow, you were doing everything right in the gym, and then knowing that that other 23 hours outside of a session that people were hammering the worst foods possible or just not enough food.
Or low quality food.
Yeah, had to sigh after that one because it stressed me out.
Yeah. So I'll paint you an individual, and we've all seen this person before, and not picking on them. But let's say maybe a slighter built individual that's been training for a fair bit, and they want to drive some muscle mass on, but they've stayed the same physique, or the weights haven't changed that much. I guarantee you ask them like, "Oh, do you eat?" "Yeah, I eat. I eat." "Are you eating enough to get some? Are you eating enough to fuel like this recovery?" "Yeah, I'm eating enough." And you explore what they're eating, and it's like noodles for brekkie, and then the next meal's an apple at 1 o'clock, and then it's some more noodles again at bloody at 4 o'clock, and that's it. You're
Why are
like,
you
oh my
hating on the noodles,
god,
Mitch?
I don't know. I'm hungry. I feel like I want some noodles, but like it's just a little bit of carb, like a little bit of fruit, and then a little bit of carb again. Like that's not going to do the job, especially for a grown individual like weighing 60, 70 kilos, just trying to put some muscle mass on. It has to be relative to your weight, to your age, your training history, to how much movement you do per day. There's quite a few factors in play to how much you've got to actually recover, like fuel you need, and the breakdowns of fats, carbs, and protein itself.
So if we're talking body composition, we want to, if when we're going to increase muscle mass, we call that our hypertrophy phase. Well, I'd say with a hypertrophy phase, you want to be in a calorie surplus. And say, for example, your end goal is a physique that you don't want to look bigger for, you actually want to look leaner. Well, you can look at that hypertrophy phase as a potentiation phase. That is going to potentiate you to when you cut, make it easier to cut, to lose body fat and look better naked on the beach or whatever it may be. So actually, the process of increasing your calories for a while before you go into a decrease is actually probably the most missed on process, especially for females, but very much for males as well. And like Mitch just explained with the noodles, we'll find that you want a calorie surplus, but then we've got to have protein and carbs are probably the most important to energy sources when we want to increase muscle mass. We need protein, and it's pretty much we want to be looking at having about I think it's 2 kilos of protein. God, wow, that'd be massive. 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, and most people don't get that. Like you hear that quite often. We speak to people and they go, I'm just not getting gains. We go, okay, well, so what does your day look like of eating? And they go, yeah, like the noodles in the morning. Well, let's add some protein to that. And it's super important that people do get enough protein because that's how muscle is made. It needs new protein, new amino acids that come from the protein to then build new fibers. So you cannot build muscle without protein.
First thing you'll notice when you add that in is your recovery increases. I don't feel as sore from my
Yeah.
sessions. I have actually more energy for my sessions as well. So we can get more work in, and we're getting better recovery. What a driver. How good is that?
And also, while lots of people know about protein, well, carbohydrates are extremely important for hypertrophy as well. And I think you'll find that what people do is if they get some people will be getting enough protein, but they're just not getting enough carbohydrates, or they're completely cutting carbohydrates out of their diet. And carbohydrates again is exactly the same thing. Like it's going to fuel you for your performance, which is going to allow you to step over and get that more volume, that more intensity. That's going to drive a stimulus. But then at the same time, it's going to really, really help you recover outside the session. So you're not going to get as much soreness, which will probably psychologically can affect you in wanting to get to the gym again. Same as the protein. But then also as well, it's gonna fuel you, and you're gonna feel more energetic. And one of the biggest issues we see with people with carbs is really like it's people undereat the carbs, or then they overeat carbs. And really, we want like about 4 grams per kilogram of body weight, and for extreme training, and then one would probably be not enough. So depending on your training, you're gonna fix it up to that kind of 1 to 4 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight.
There's another cool saying here: eat for what you're about to do, or eat for what you've just done. So if you know what your day or your week looks like, you can kind of tailor your nutrition a little bit. So if I know I have a big session in the morning, I still got to get some food in before I train. I guarantee my performance is going to be better having something in my system and some fuel in my system to train in the morning. And then afterwards, I'm going to get something to speed up that recovery. I'm going to throw, that's why like a protein shake so popular, right? It delivers its protein direct to the system pretty quick. And hopefully I can match it with some milk or something to get some carbs in there. And that helps out that recovery. Um, and then again, like in the evening, if I know I'm training in the evening, I want to make sure I get some food in like 30 minutes, like an hour before training. And again, so I've got fuel in my system. What a pet peeve is when you get someone in and like you watch them crash maybe 30 minutes into a session, like, hey, are you okay? What's wrong? Oh, like, oh, I'm low energy. I'm like, mate, when's the last time you ate? Oh, it was like 5 hours ago. Ah, goddamn. You're not going to get that stimulus or the recovery from that session that you need if you're not fueling up prior or post. Really, really important.
Priority on the hierarchy of things is that I just make sure that I get enough carbs, enough protein, and enough fat throughout my whole day. But like Mitch said, like if you look at any bodybuilder that actually is trying to build muscle and really wants to get results, well, they're going to eat more often. They're going to eat more often, and they're going to make sure that they're fueling for the sessions. Like Mitch said, well, you still can get gains from eating the right amount in a day, but wow, we need to actually make sure that we're fueling for the session as things get more intense, as we're trying to create more volume and intensity. It's super important. And quite a lot of we have a lot of hard gainers coming to the gym here, and we get incredible results with them. And what you'll find is like there's two words. Like one is anabolic, and we probably know that from anabolic hormones, as steroids. But anabolic just is really the body building itself up, like growing and actually having energy. And then we have catabolic, is where the body is actually eating itself to some degree and actually breaking itself down. Well, actually, when we eat, we actually become more anabolic, and we want that training to be anabolic, and we can actually having a surplus of calories and eating protein and eating carbs, believe it or not, actually drops. Sorry, it actually increases your maximal recoverable volume because you're more anabolic, and it actually decreases, which is I think is incredible. Actually decreases your your minimal minimal your minimal adaptive volume.
Got it.
So so what actually happens then is we actually when you're anabolic, you can actually train less when you're eating the right foods to get more results. Bingo! Like that is like it. Now you'll know that. Hopefully, you'll be eating right and training right.
Oh, beautiful. Just a little bit more on that on eating for what you're about to do or what you've just done. If you haven't trained as much, or you know that like there's a dip in your activity levels, there's nothing wrong with peeling back the intake a little bit. So when you have high activity, high movement, A, in the gym environment, and B, you're just active, just buzzing around, maybe playing sport, or you're walking around all day, great time to get some extra fuel into the system
Mm.
because it's going to need it. And on days where you're at rest, or maybe you're very inactive, and again, insert whatever reasons, if you are mindful enough to pull back the intake a little bit, that's a wise decision. And that is a great way to manage just your intake as a human being, but bloody hard to be mindful.
I think that's so important what Mitch just said, and I also think that it's such a shame that it's the complete opposite. When what people do is they train and with busy lives and eat less, and then they have a day off on a Saturday or Sunday, and they're not training, and they actually eat way more because they're eating for enjoyment. And there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
eating for enjoyment, right? But at the same time, understand that you don't actually need that much food because you're not burning as much energy. I think an interesting one is to just briefly touch on supplements.
Yeah, okay. That's the word.
So the three big supplements that come to mind with hypertrophy, and these are in food, right? So it's super important. We don't need to supplement them, but they can be extremely effective when you do supplement with them. Number one is just protein. So again, that comes from food. Most of us know that. If But if we're not getting kind of them numbers that I said earlier, then it really can help to have a whey protein powder, decent whey protein powder just there to stock up and just hit the required amounts to just not lose any gains. Um, Another one, and also I think it's important to mention that people who are on vegetarian diets who don't eat red meats, well, they might actually struggle to get the right proteins, and they may have to like look outside the box a little bit more, and like think outside the box a little bit more, and then add more vegetarian proteins to the diet to get that cool. We call it an amino acid, like it's the building blocks of protein. And actually, lots of vegetables don't have that full profile, so we actually kind of got to mix and match when you're vegetarian a little bit more.
It's a harder demand, right? You have to be just a little bit smarter how you
Yeah.
do things. Like full respect to the choices, but it does demand that you make smarter, informed decisions with how you fuel yourself. And there are supplements out there that help out with amino acid profiles and that sort of stuff that are the non-animal farmed and that sort of stuff. But yeah, it just calls for research.
And the next one is creatine, and I actually think creatine is an incredible supplement. It's neuroprotective, so it actually helps your brain. Actually, is good brain energy, and really in our cells, there's creatine at all times, ready to make a chemical reaction to create ATP, which is like your muscle energy, which is ATP is life, right? Like that muscle energy is you need that to live. And creatine is now like it's actually one of the most studied
Yeah, the most.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is, yeah, sorry, it is the most studied supplement that exists. And for a while there was some concerns of it not being healthy, but actually because it's been studied so much, it has the highest health rating of all
Yeah.
supplements, safety rating, sorry, of all supplements. And again, if you aren't eating, because it's mostly found in red meat, if you're not eating red meat, then it's something that you might want to look to supplement, not just for your training, but also for health reasons.
Yeah, just for the old brain. Like that's probably something I look at more at now. Things that's going to help me remember,
Mm,
help like get
yeah.
rid of that brain fog. Things of that nature are huge. Naturally incur in the body, really well researched, super cheap, super affordable as
Ah,
well.
yeah.
It's probably one of the ones that you default to. Like I'm not a big supplement pusher or whatsoever, but if you're going to recommend anything, protein, creatine, right up there as a one
Yeah,
and two.
and creatine's proven now as well, and it's also shown that you don't have to do. I think there was this time where people used to do a loading phase, well, you can just take 2 to 5 grams a day in your smoothie or something like that. That's what I do, and you can take it every day. You don't have to take it just when you're training. And I think you'll find that if you haven't taken creatine before and you are deficient in creatine, when you first start taking it, you'll probably get a big hit. And it's muscle energy, so you normally feel it in the session, or you can feel it in the session. The last one is leucine. So leucine will be found in most good protein powders. There'll be a nice high amount of it, so you don't have to really worry about it. Again, it comes down to if you're not having a milk-based protein powder, then you might want to find a vegetarian version or a vegan version that actually has a decent amount of leucine in, or you might want to supplement leucine. Good studies on leucine show how there's two pathways. Again, we talk about anabolic and catabolic. Well, one being more anabolic, we call mTOR, which actually leucine increases that. So it increases the ability for the muscle to build muscle, the body to build muscle. So then three, leucine, creatine, and making sure you get enough protein and your carbs is fantastic for your diet side of things.
Like the big players there. Like there are some other stuff out there that gives a nice bit of benefit, but they're your big three players. Like protect your wallet. Those three will do like 90% of the work that you need for putting on some old muscle.
Yeah, totally. And do you want to talk about a little bit about injury?
Oh, 100%. Okay.
Well, first off, like we just discussed, like nutrition is going to play a massive part in injury. So as you making sure you have enough protein, carbohydrates to rebuild the body, not get too much DOMS is always going to play a massive factor in not getting injured from training. So sadly, injury sometimes it's just going to happen. It's just going to be a part of your life when you are training consistently over time. We always try and make sure it's not, and like we work our very best with all the most recent information to try and limit it as much as possible. There's also a lot of it comes down to when if it does happen, then you want to like look at why it happened and you want to change your training around it, but try not to stop training.
I think you may have heard the term overuse. So sometimes if like we just stick with one pattern and we never really mix it up or use variations and we just hit the pattern again and again and the volume or the intensity is just continuously high, we kind of run into that overuse where we can kind of just over piss off that tissue and we result in like a little bit of discomfort or pain. So make sure that we are managing, we're mixing up variations and we're stimulating that tissue in different ways. And think of that as like it could be a back squat to a front squat to a goblet squat. And those different loading patterns are going to cause different firing patterns and different areas are going to slightly load. And on top of that, making sure we do have peaks and troughs with our volume, our reps and our sets, and our intensity, our weight, how heavy it is. And honestly, that is enough to just mix up that localized volume and generally negate that issue.
You sometimes find that there's such a good point, Mitch. You literally just explained the best ways there, just straight up on how to mitigate injury
Thank
as
you.
well as possible. And I think that what you'll find is quite often oversimplicity is the issue. Like Mitch just said there. Well, what actually happens is if I continuously expose muscle tissues to the same stimulus over and over again, they can get chronic irritations, and this often happens from programming issues. And where you might be like, okay, well, squats are the best movement to train my quads. Well, you want to actually make sure that you have variations, and the variation can come from variations in squats. And we know from scientific evidence that actually not all exercises are equal, and actually certain fibers of muscles will be fired for one exercise, but actually then fired from another exercise. So from an injury perspective, we want to make sure that we have a decent amount of variation. Yeah. But then from a hypertrophy perspective, we want to make sure that we have a decent amount of variation. But here's the kicker, and it's always everything. As you learn more and more over time, you learn that there's no just so I need to variate everything. Like so, you might take that and you might go, okay, well, so I need to make sure I change my exercise all the time to not get injured. Well, if you change your exercise all the time to not get injured, you will leave a lot of gains on the table because we want to continuously stimulate the same muscle fibers over and over again for them to adapt, and then we switch it up. And as you build resistance, for example, to a certain exercise, say for example, I do squats for a month, then we're talking about that MRV again. Well, actually, what happens is I now need to do so many squats to get an adaptation. Well, what I can do is I can just change up the exercise slightly, and then what I can do is I get new adaptation from less work from that movement, while I've also haven't got that chronic irritation from doing the same movement over and over again, and I can now fire up different muscles.
Yeah, that's an awesome point, James. And like generally we found, and this is not a gospel, but we find we mix up every like 3 to 5 weeks, like 3, 4 weeks. We kind of get that slight different effort of that variation or volume or intensity or whatever it happens to be, or just complete different movement itself. So that's a nice default if you're building your own program at home.
Yeah, and it can be from like I'm still doing squats, but on the side now I'm gonna do knee extensions, or I'm gonna do a different variation of squat, maybe like it can be a sumo squat. It can just be a variation of the exercise that allows that muscle to then get moved into or the joint to get moved into different positions. And when it comes to hypertrophy as well, in regards to variation and talking how like no one exercise stimulates really every single muscle unit or muscle fiber, then what we need to do is we need to look at, okay, so I want to build my quads. So well, I can give you a exercise that, and we've spoken about this before, but it's very important. Well, I think it's very important in hypertrophy. Well, I want an exercise that stimulates that quad at its most lengthened phase, its middle phase, and its most shortened phase, and through its full biomechanical range of motion, which people forget, right? So, for example, if I'm doing a squat, well, when I'm coming out of the squat, I'm actually mostly loading that quad in its most lengthened position. Well, what pairs up with that perfectly? Well, like a knee extension pairs up perfectly because now I'm loading that quad in its more shortened position. And we talk about recovery and frequency. Well, these things pair up really well because however much they're very similar and I feel it in my quads, they're actually hitting very different muscle fibers.
Closing points or any additional points to say?
No,
Do we elaborate enough with ladies and muscle and the word toning?
I think you made such a good point at the beginning, and it did cover it a lot. But with the word toning, when people do come in, I think you've got to look at it a couple of ways. Well, toning is increasing muscle mass and decreasing body fat at the same time. That's what's going to make a muscle toned, look toned to appearance. And also at the same time, it's also that we talk about that sarcoplasmic growth where you're actually sweating out the muscle. Well, once you've done the sarcoplasmic growth side of things and you've built the myofibrillas, you are going to have a more dense, toned looking muscle. So I understand tone. I get what people do. I think the biggest mistake with toning is what people believe the rep range for toning to be. I think that most women or men who want to tone will think that they have to do these very high burnout reps of 15, 30 plus. And again, it doesn't obey by the kind of principles that we've said earlier. You actually are probably going to get better results and more tone from hitting them kind of 8 to 12 rep ranges with a potentiation phase of 12 to 15.
some mechanical load, man, getting
Yep.
some weight on that.
Yeah, load is what will drive the muscle to tone. I feel like sometimes people think they've got tone, but really what they've done is they've just lost a lot of body fat around a muscle that hasn't grown. And you run the risk of losing muscle fat if you keep doing that, muscle mass when you keep doing that, and it can be a very slippery slope from there on.
It can be
with
very
training.
short-sighted too,
Yeah,
right?
100%. Yeah,
If
it's like you're not going to go far like that with that training, and like we've discussed a few times in podcasts, if you think that's what worked for you and you keep doing that, well, actually, you're not going to get far. You're going to continuously just drive yourself into a calorie deficit, and you're going to lose a lot of muscle mass, and you will lose body fat, and there will be a point where you pretty look like a way that you'd like to look, but you might not be able to maintain that.
oh god, that's pet peeve one.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's wrap it up. Some of the big points. If you're trying to build muscle, you've got to be eating, guys. You've got to be in that slight calorie surplus, and that means just like consuming a little bit more calories than your body likes to burn, and the additional movement that you're doing in the day is. And that there are ways to work this out, but you know you can just test and adjust as you go along by jumping on the scales or wherever it happens to be. There's some beautiful apps out there. Renaissance periodization.
Yeah, Renaissance periodization.
There we go,
Yeah.
Renaissance.
And the other
Um,
one,
oh god,
macro factor.
that's the one.
Yeah,
That's the one.
they're really good because what they do is they run you through, again, like we talk about potentiation phases. They run you through this kind of like I hate calling it a bulk phase because I don't think it really, like a muscle increase phase, and then they run you through. Now this is the key point, a maintenance phase, and this is what people just don't do ever, but it is probably the most important phase of all of them. It's where I teach my body that is my new sticking point. I teach my body that, hey, I've put on this weight. Now this is where I'm going to stay, so that then I can do my cut, rather than just go back to normal as soon as possible. So, and the same thing is with strength training is the same kind of thing. Maintenance volume is actually one of the most missed things. It's like when I'm training a certain muscle, if I want to gain strength in my pecs, but I want to maintain my back so I can increase the volume on my pecs, well, I actually need to do a maintenance volume for my lats. So maintenance is such an important concept, which maybe we can talk about further at another stage.
Dude, get it in. It's awesome to drive the muscles.
Sorry, I sidetracked there a little
No,
bit.
no, no. It's a good point. So those two apps are pretty wicked, and they got like little AI systems in there that help you adapt and change depending on what your goals are. But anyway, we'll move on. So outside of food, probably getting enough frequency in and adherence to whatever program you're doing. So if you're actually consistent with it and you're using some of those principles we talked about earlier with minimal effective dose and recovery and that sort of stuff, it's massive. It's honestly 80%. If you get enough food in and you get a good frequency and good stimulus, you're going to be driving some positive adaptation.
And if you have your adherence and you're doing all these things, and you're not training with us at Benchmark, I would just ask my coach, do you progressive overload? And I'd see if he does. And if they don't, and each session just feels like a hodgepodge of a random group of exercises and they're not more intense than the other, and you don't have a certain amount of the same movement enough to adapt to it, then I'd question my training and why I might not be getting results.
Yeah, and those notes should be shared with you, or you should be doing them yourself. Like to have a history of what's been done, and so you have these notes to reflect on or to progressively overload, it is a must. So a really good point. I'd be like, hey, prove it. Show me.
Yeah.
Where's our progressive overload?
And if they don't know what you're saying, then I'd be fearful and
Red flag.
join
red flag.
Benchmark Canterbury. Straight away.
Shout out to Benchmark. And I'd probably leave it there. Any ones I'm missing that we should kind of summarize on, mate?
No, I think that was pretty much it.
They're the two big
Yeah.
ones.
Thanks, guys.
So awesome. Love it. Get swole, guys. Get jacked. We love it. Put some goddamn muscle on. Thank you for joining us today, guys. We'll look forward to catching you in the next episode.
Cheers.